Silver Society.
Welcome to the Silver Eye Society, the podcast where we look at movies to find the ancient themes behind our modern issues. This is the first edition of our AMA, an Ask Me Anything, where patrons have submitted their questions. We've also taken questions from the general public. The Silver Eye Society will consider your inquiries in this episode. So let's go through some of the questions that we're going to consider, so that you have an idea if you want to stick around for these interesting questions. We've got questions on the origin of the name of the Silver Eye Society. We've got questions on my credentials. Someone's a narc. We've got questions on what I do with my time. Perhaps Justin will also take up that question. He's averse to questioning. He has already rejected that question. We've also got questions on which demon we would be if we could be a demon. Got questions on film, of course. What films will stand the test of time? My favorite films, your favorite films, favorite directors, all that good stuff. Questions on books. Got what are our favorite books, our most formative books. Those are different. And we've got a few more questions that really get into some more deep issues, like what to do to further free yourself from the burdens of what weighs you, both emotionally, mentally, and in your everyday life. We've got questions about what dead people we'd like to have beers with, which is a great question. We've got questions about how to deal with the stress of being fired for not complying with mandates. Very, very heavy question. Got questions on favorite poems, and I will be reciting a favorite poem. And we may get to a question on explaining the dogs that you sometimes see in my Instagram stories, if we get to the end and we have time. So let's jump into the first ever Silver Eye Society AMA, and it is being recorded outside, so bear with us. This is what we do. We labor for the people. So let us labor. Justin?
Excellent. Well, I'm still exactly where I always am, and I am not outside, and I do not have a word of the podcast, so this isn't a podcast that requires a word of the podcast. Give myself a little break. And also, I reject the idea that I'm going to answer every question put to me. I'm not on trial here. I am not. I'm not an open person to strangers. I don't know who you are. You're asking some of you. I do know who you are. You could be cyber stalkers for all I know. Yeah. That's the world we live in. We live in a dangerous cyber world, and so I just want to put that out there right at the beginning. AMA was not my idea. I didn't come up with it. It's your idea. Now look at you. You're in hiding in the wilderness. Do you see what happens?
Anti-AMA. This is an anti-AMA. We're answering the questions that we see fit. Now, let's start with the first question, which is a fair question. What's the origin of the name of the Silver Eye Society? Oh boy. Naming this podcast was quite a debacle. It was mainly my burden. Justin just negated every option that I put forth, so that you were the critic and I was the originator of ideas. As it goes, I say as it goes, at least when we work together. And the Silver Eye Society came out of the idea that we're looking at movies specifically. So that's where silver comes from, the silver screen. But the eye is the idea of insight. I wanted to use eye as a symbol for seeking insight, for looking deeper, for examination. So putting all that all together, you get the Silver Eye Society. And society, I like secret stuff. So I wanted to kind of conjure this idea of a secret society that looks into art for deeper insight. And finally, I got Justin to concede to the name.
Yeah, it's not a bad name. That's a story that you tell yourself to make yourself feel good, and I fine with it. And there's some truth to it. You did come up with more names than I did. Some of my names were controversial. Maybe someday we'll go back through that. I didn't study up on this question a lot, but one thing I do remember is you wanted to use the word lodge. You wanted to somehow use a secret society with the word lodge, and I said I didn't like that word. That I thought that it didn't make much sense.
I still like that word. There were several ones. There was like the Silver Eye.
It was the Silver Lodge. That made no sense.
Silver Lodge, yeah. And there was like the Dark something, but then it was like, oh, we're kind of gonna like get into a copyright fight with the Dark Horse podcast, so let's not. So we kind of a Twin Peaks vibe. That's what we're going for. Twin Peaks vibe. Just
we ended up where we ended up, and it's acceptable.
Yeah,
now.
The Silver Eye Society is still a secret society. Both in the fact that it is a society that's closed to the outside, you have to be a member, and also the fact that it is not fully well known yet. But it will always remain a relatively secret society. That's the point. The whole, society.
Well, that was another thing that I was concerned about, is that when you're trying to produce something which you want a lot of people to see, calling it a secret, it, has this kind of, well, does that really make sense? And, there was questions of, I didn't want it to sound too much like a cult. And then there was also questions of...
Except you always talk about wanting to start a cult, so...
No, I do not. Misinformation.
Well, I'm utilizing the Streisand effect for marketing purposes. We call it a secret society, and then people say, hey, what's that secret about? Come and find out. Join us as a member, so you know. Let's move on. Okay. What's your career outside of the podcast? I'm a writer, so I primarily do copywriting, which is kind of a more boring type of writing, less creative and more geared towards the needs of my clients. And that's how I pay the bills. I also do creative writing on the side of that, but that's less financially viable. And the podcast is third to those endeavors. So primarily I'm a writer. Would you like to divulge your you're gonna remain a secret?
Laughing.
Because I know that you hate to answer.
Yeah, I'm not going to talk about my career. Fuck that. There's no point in that. No one's interested, and I'm not interested either. So.
I mean, see, this is why I think that Secret Society was a perfect name for anything that you participate in, because you can just claim that you're going to remain a mystery. So.
No, I'm just living the life that everyone is supposed to live before everyone got this idea in their head. They needed to go on the internet and blurt out every small detail about their own life to no effect. The worst part about it is this kind of like, let me take a picture of my food all the time and show you pictures of my food. I always found that extraordinarily offensive, and I never wanted to be a part of that. And that is just how I feel. Did a bug bite you or something? You look like you've maybe been bitten by a bug.
Yeah, I'm getting splinters from this wooden bench that I'm sitting on. But that's what I do for the people. I take injury for the people. Well, if it had
been the Silver Lodge podcast, you would have had even more splinters. Think about that. Lodges are made of wood, generally.
Well, lodge sounds pretty rich, so that's what I'm trying to, conjure up.
That was another thing that we went back and forth on. And I said it sounds kind of like a ski lodge.
That's true.
The Silver Lodge.
And then
there's something gross about it. It
we
reminds
found
me
out
of like
that it was
Abraham
an eye doctor place also, and so we were like another copyright infringement.
No, I think the Silver Eye was the eye doctor thing. The eye part was obviously the part that had to do with an eye doctor.
That's
It wasn't a lodge that had to do with an eye doctor. Don't go to a lodge for your eye health.
Okay.
Don't do
Next question. What are your educational qualifications? This is a mildly offensive question to me because I think that we have never reached a time where educational qualifications mean less. On the contrary, I have now found myself suspicious of people with educational qualifications that go about at master's and beyond. Then I start to wonder if you have a malformed understanding of the world. At least if your education is from the United States, because I think the United States is particularly, academia is suffering here from being a kind of echo chamber of indoctrination. And this is not that I'm anti-education. I have a bachelor's in psychology. That is my on-paper credential. And I found it relatively useful. The most useful part of that education was learning how to read and structure research and experimentation. That was useful. Everything else, not so much. And I have friends that are in university now for similar majors around like mental health, psychology, all of that, education, and they're basically learning white privilege as a fact in their courses that are supposed to be geared towards psychological help, which I find damning as it's an indication of the strange infiltration of ideas that are not really well founded. I mean, enjoy the idea of white privilege all you want, but it's a theory. Like, it's just a hypothesis. It's not a fact. And so a lot of these things that are infiltrating education are being presented as facts to people, and they should be presented as things that you can use to look at the world in different ways. And so I think in some regard, education is beginning to hinder that for some people. So I actually would like to pursue more education just because I like to learn, but now I partially don't feel like it's worth it. I never really felt like it's worth it because I've always felt like traditional, university education is incredibly overpriced. And so I was always like from before I even, got into university, I was always suspicious of anything that would cost that much. Like, it shouldn't cost that much. I was always very resentful of that. So I was really slow about going about getting my education. And the reality is that if someone wanted to know how to think more like me or whatever, it wouldn't be by going to university. That's not what would bring about the worldview that I have now. I'm just grateful that I learned how to read research. That is useful. Like, that kind of technical education, I think that still stands as useful. But when it comes to developing a nuanced and critical worldview, I got that from reading and from traveling and from learning about different perspectives through consuming lots of different media and ideas, and going to different places is a great way to actually become a more well-rounded thinker. So that's my bit on academia, though I could go for a long time. Would you like to divulge your educational qualifications? Because I think that you have a similar story to mine in that a lot of your worldview and your whatever, how can you say, like, the information that you know isn't exactly from a degree, even though you did go to university.
So first off, anyone who has a degree in psychology is probably mentally ill. I think we can all agree on that, right? Even you can agree on that.
Yeah.
I'm sure. Yeah. I mean, that's like whenever anyone says, oh, what are you studying? Psychology? It's like, come on, you know what's going on. Number two, so I have a bachelor's degree in history. And then I also briefly did a little bit of master's degree work specific to Russian East European studies. Quit that, cost too much. Whole story there about how it just felt like that was going to be a path to nowhere.
To ruin.
The cost is a problem, but that's a separate issue. Well, I wouldn't go so far as to say that.
I kind of say it's a scam.
Well,
when it gets that expensive, and like now at this point, you have to have a degree for things that don't actually require a degree, and the degree just becomes this arms race. It just becomes a money game. It just becomes a status game. So I just think the whole system of education, at least in the United States, is really damaged. And so, that's my opinion on it.
So the other thing is, let's for my own. I won't speak for everyone. I think that, if there's technical specialties or something like that, you need to go to get higher education for. There are things you can't learn by yourself. And there were teachers and professors that I still remember and valued and can show me different things that I want to point. All they can really do, I think, in the best case scenario, is point you towards other places that you need to spend your time actually doing. But the most important thing to me, in terms of education, is reading, and that's something I did starting from a long time. When I was a kid, and never stopped doing. And that's, look, honestly, it's Well, it's just I don't want to go into it all. Yes, I think it is a bit of a scam.
I'm glad
a lot
you
of
come
it,
around.
but it's not like it's just one person's fault. It's everyone's fault because if you go to a university and you expect a gigantic sports complex to be built and for every whim, for there to be saunas on campus and for there to have, if you stub your toe, for there to be a counselor available and for everything to be, I mean, look, I'm overdoing that. But if you expect to go to a university that's supposed to take care of every single one of your needs and cater to your whimsy, then it's going to cost more because you're getting more stuff. And so that's a trade-off. And if you want to do that, then I guess that's your trade-off. But the system's fault. It'll collapse eventually. Let's just be honest. It's going to eventually collapse. I mean, it can't. Well, I mean, it's. Yeah. Are we joking?
I mean, it is. It is. Look, because you have already ways to bypass for some industries, not for all. I mean, obviously, if you want to be a doctor, you still have to go through that system. And good. No one's saying here that, doctors should be able to teach themselves on the internet. Like, that's not what anybody's saying.
I'm a doctor. I'm a self-taught doctor. I proclaim it now. Wait, I cannot do that. I give no medical advice.
Yeah. We'll get somehow penalized. Someone will take this advice as medical advice and sue us.
Moving on. This is boring. Education, school's out forever. That's what Alice Cooper said. That's a poetry that I learned in middle school.
Teacher, leave those kids alone is another great piece of poetry on the failure of the educational institution. Anyway, moving on. Another question that I received was, how do you spend your time? Which is kind of a good question. It's a good question, though, because sometimes I ask myself the same thing. At the end of the day, I say, what the hell did you do today? What did you actually even do today? I work from home. And so when I have my own hours, which can lead to chaos. And it's very easy to turn around and be like, what the hell did I do today? So I don't leave my house a lot. So there's that. I do everything from home. I work from home. I work out at home. I don't know. I watch movies and listen to music at home. I don't know. I just work a lot, honestly. Very unproductively. So maybe that's why I work so much. But I spend almost all of the day working on something, whether it's my copywriting business, my personal creative writing, the podcast, or reading, watching movies, and doing my own hobbies, whatever it is, gardening, drawing, sometimes, if I get around to that. So it's not particularly an exciting life. I think the most exciting thing that people don't understand about my life, I think that's why maybe I get this question, is that I travel around a lot. I don't tend to live in any single place for more than a year. LA is the place I've lived the longest so far. And so I'm constantly trying to live in different places throughout the country, at least for now, and maybe eventually outside the country. And my work allows me to do that. And so that's kind of the unusual thing, I guess, in my life that people don't understand, because they're like, why are you all over the place? It's like, because I can be. Would love for you to answer that question.
Well, on the note of you being inefficient in your work, which is absolutely correct, I didn't get these questions actually outlined to me until about 30 minutes before we did this. And so I thought, well, I'll jot down a couple of answers, but I'm mainly going to freestyle. And I looked back just now and I looked at the answer that I wrote, and I just simply had written, how do you spend your time? And it just says, in triumph and rage. And I think that I'm going to just stick with that because that's about right. I think that covers perfect. It in a general sort of way. But you can follow me on Instagram to watch my constant updates of the food that I eat and other ephemera.
Your grainy, dark, somehow vaguely gothic, pre-2010 style photography. Highly recommended. I mean, it's definitely refreshing compared to the norm on Instagram, which is somehow everybody has like a personal, professional photographer following them around. I was raised in this, Instagram kind of generation, and even still, my photos are a little homemade, shall we say. So let's move on to the next question.
So briefly, yeah, we should, because as the audience can tell, we were supposed to start this 2 hours ago, and now the sun is setting on you, and so we're going to have another podcast where you're just simply in the dark. And I think that's funny But
Yes.
and it also really illustrates visually the truth of what you're saying. And I just wanted to make sure that I'm here to tell the viewers you're actually telling the truth about a lot of things.
That's the beauty of film, is that it tells the truth when it's good. And so you don't have to listen to me. Just look at my life. I'm doing a podcast outside. It's about 55 degrees. And the sun is setting on me, as you said. And you may hear children screaming and motorcycles revving in the background because, like I said, I am never in one place for too long. And right now I don't know where the hell I am. But it's an interesting place. It's outside LA. I fled LA for a little bit. And there's a lot of don't tread on me flags and stop the mandate signs around this neighborhood. And a lot of noise, which I think those things all go hand in hand. And I feel welcome here. But you may hear the people that are welcoming me with their neighborhood sounds in the background. So enjoy the sounds of life.
So I'm going to have to... Yeah, that's a stereotype. I would like to say my mouse pad actually
It's literally
recently,
real. It's happening right now. It's not a stereotype.
So I decided
it's real.
to buy a Don't Tread on Me mouse pad recently.
Yeah.
I'm holding it up to the camera.
You want to show it?
And
You're doing
I did.
what do you
And,
call this? The influencers do this. They do what do you call unboxing or like whatever when they show
don't
like
know. Sure.
here's a haul video. That's what they call it. I bought this recently.
Okay.
You're doing a haul video and you don't even know it.
Well, my point is that this is a very quiet place. There are no, and so just because you have a Don't Tread on Me paraphernalia does not mean that you are rowdy or,
That's true.
That's all I wanted to say.
That's true.
We're all different.
We're all different. Just don't tread on any of us. Anyway, okay, moving on. Here's a great question from one of our patrons. This is an awesome question. If you could be reborn as any demon, real or fictional, which that's an interesting point, what/who would it be? So I'm hoping we don't have any real demons that we are. I think all demons may be relatively fictional, but it depends how you define that. So I will go first. At first I had trouble with this question because I don't have like an encyclopedic registry of all the demons that exist in my mind. And then it hit me. Baba Yaga. Baba Yaga is a supernatural entity of the Slavic tradition, something like that.
That's correct.
Yeah, right. I don't know.
I do
it's a
have an
little more narrow.
encyclopedic knowledge of demonology in my head. So.
Yeah. Another thing that university did not provide you. What a loss. And see, everybody needs that. And Baba Yaga is I like Baba Yaga, and I feel I relate to Baba Yaga because she can be both good and bad. So it's not a strictly evil demon. It's a demon that in some cases does help people and in other cases hurts people. And but most importantly, she lives in the forest alone in a house that can pick up itself with chicken legs and run off. That's just like I aim and aspire to live like Baba Yaga.
So I don't accept answering this question directly. What I will say is, how do you know you already aren't living out the life of a demonic entity? Assuming that if you were reborn as such, one might suggest that your previous life, the memory of which would be cleared. Therefore, you would only be in the consciousness of the creature in which we're supposing you were in. Therefore, you wouldn't know. Therefore, you might now be doing that and simply not know.
You're saying...
As night descends upon the forest, listen well to my words.
Well, there's also...
I'm saying that. How would you know?
Yeah, I mean, and there's the argument that we can all become possessed, right? We spoke about that, I think, in one of the old library circuses on that book I read, the Madness, Creativity, and the Daemonic, something like that, because the language of possession was previously also used just to refer to becoming very impassioned about something. So you can be possessed by a passion to create a painting, and it's similar. It's linked. That's that idea of becoming possessed by some spirit, both good or bad, because the daemon is also this kind of neutral entity that can be bad or good. And so there is the argument that we all have a daemon.
This person's obviously just trying to get at a kind of fun question.
Let's have some
so
fun.
as a fun answer, I'm having fun. Let me give you a fun answer about demons. You should go check out the Japanese kind of pantheon of demons. I think they're called yokai. Actually, I'll look that up for you. They're silly. A lot of them are silly. Some of them aren't silly, but that's fun if you're into learning about some demons. Here, let me make sure that I'm correct on that word. So
and you refuse to give your own
Japanese
take?
Japanese folkloric.
Yeah, but what are
Demons
you?
is a harsh word.
It is.
But anyway, yokai. Yokai, which I think we actually talked about in the Japanese movie House.
Oh, we did. All right.
But we were using it slightly more as a ghost because I was using it like a Wikipedia entry or whatever to try to understand it. But yokai are more these like folkloric. There's thousands of them. You know, they'll just be completely odd. The Eastern conception of these folkloric demons, kind of like what you were saying, like Baba Yaga. You know, a house that has chicken legs. It seems kind of silly, right? It's not like, oh, I am, from one of the hierarchies of hell or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, okay. So I mean, I don't know. I'm not gonna.
You'd be a silly demon. You'd be the kind of demon that throws spoons around or something.
Well, those are poltergeists generally. Oh. Worse than demons.
That's what I get for not
spoon
pursuing a master's. Would have known that.
Spoon throwers. I wanted to say that in general, I don't want to be anything besides what I am. I've never wanted to be let that be your inspiration. You don't need to be anybody else, whoever you are.
Human or demon?
Questioner.
Demons should love themselves too. All right, let's move on to favorite film/filmmaker. Important question for a podcast that uses film for its base discussions. So I'll go first. My favorite films. Look, I know that we've got to answer these type of questions, but every time I get them, I suffer because I find it so hard to recall my favorite films and my favorite filmmakers, favorite books, all that. I have to do a bunch of research to jog my memory and remember, oh yeah, that's right, this one. I should keep a list or something. But for movies that I love, it's kind of a weird one, but Au Hasard Balthazar is a French film by Robert Bresson, and it's a bit of
clearly didn't take French classes in university.
I
from that
did
accent.
Though, thank you. I took 2 semesters.
I know, but that's terrible. It's fucking terrible.
Would you like to say it properly?
No, I don't, because the problem is whenever you're an American and you speak French actually well, then you sound like a dickhead when you actually use the accent correctly.
Yeah, that's why I'm trying to tread the balance of not sounding like a dickhead.
I already do that in Word of the Podcast.
Anyway, so that movie is about a donkey. Main character is a donkey, and it is black and white, and it made me cry. So I'll leave it at that. That's a great selling point already. But to bring it more to the modern day, Midsomart is one of my favorite newer films that came out. It's 2019. And Midsomart, it's almost hard for me to talk about it because I like it so much. The first time I saw that movie, I was just enthralled with everything about it. I love the elements of kind of like this paganism that underlies the storytelling. I love the visual, like the cinematography. I love the acting. I just love everything about it. That movie is so good. And the plot, the actual theme is so relevant. But we're going to talk about this more because it answers a later question. And then my third favorite movie, not in any order, but just the third one that I'll give, is The Seventh Seal by Bergman. That was one of the first movies that kind of stirred the existentialist in me before I really understood what existentialism even was. I remember seeing that movie and it filled me with such a strange emotion because it was both bitter and sweet. It's the perfect mix of tragic beauty, and it's the most masterful movie depicting the human condition. I love it. It's so good. So those are my favorites. Filmmakers: Bergman, Sofia Coppola, I love her movies. I don't care, whatever. I know they're like very lady movies, but I think they're fucking awesome for, if you want to call them lady movies, they're pretty badass lady movies. Like the color palette she works with is just always so beautiful. The storytelling, the visual elements in her movies are so memorable. She does a great job. It's undeniable. Herzog is a great storyteller, and his movies are just, his documentaries, all of it. It's just, I like how they're done visually. There's something about the pacing in his films that makes you think with him. He does a really good job of bringing you along with his way of thinking, which is what else could you ask for as, a filmmaker? That is exactly what you're supposed to do. Tarkovsky, when I first saw Solaris, I was like, oh, this is another. Why are you mocking me in the background?
You need to go through every film you ever liked while the sun literally sets and then revolves back around to dawn. I need you to.
I have only two more. Let me finish.
Christ.
You're just mad because I'm taking all the good ones. So Tarkovsky.
No, I just want to make sure. Do you have? Yeah, you are taking all the good ones.
I am.
Go ahead.
Ari Aster and Robert Eggers. So Ari Aster did Midsommar. He did Hereditary 2, and then Robert Eggers did The Lighthouse and The Witch. Which we'll talk about those shortly too. So that's my list of favorite filmmakers. Kind of long, not just one. I can't do just one.
Yeah, great. So I'll do 0 to save us all time. Also, the question is, in terms of the technical filmmaking, are you sure? Since it is literally nighttime now during this Ask Me Anything, are you sure that the video you're going to use is usable in some way? Because if not, I need you to put some flashlights around your head so that we can continue on with this.
Okay.
Or some candles or something. Are we good?
Let me check.
Yeah, I'm just gonna keep this live. I'm not gonna edit this out because I want people to understand. I want people to feel the the realness, the truth of this, the feeling that is live, even though it's not live, because that's just not how we do it. So we don't even really understand the software we need to record podcasts live. Therefore, I will continue to talk while she pretends like time doesn't exist and that somehow she can record in total darkness. And I will answer this question to a degree myself.
I don't have any way to do more light.
Okay, well, just run around and have fun while I answer this question. I actually think that in different periods of life, we have favorite movies. And so what I liked when I was, 5 years old is going to be different than what I would like 20 years later, and, on and on and on. So if I tell you a movie that I like now, in the future, who knows if I'll like it or not? That is my non-answer. Though, for the most part, I agree with many of the selections that my co-host has just mentioned.
That's terrible. That's a terrible answer. All right, moving on then.
But you just took all of a lot of the movies that I thought are good, and many of which I recommended to you.
No.
And you still continue to mispronounce Ari Aster's name weird. Like Ari or something. You say weird.
Ari.
Sorry, Mr. Yeah, you don't say it though. You say like Ari Aster or something.
No,
you do it like as one word, Ari Aster or something. It's not. It's like it's no good.
Stop it.
And then in terms of like, there's something that I don't like about. I'll just tell you what I don't like. That's what I'm better at. So, Sofia Coppola, she did Lost in Translation and the what was the other one?
The Virgin Suicides.
That was a big one. I watched both those movies and I get it. I actually almost left the theater during Lost in Translation. I remember that because I actually fell asleep and stopped. Like I was falling asleep in the theater, and I think that she reminds me also, there was this time around the 2005-ish, 2015, where there's the other director that I despise that I tell you about all the time. Yes, thank you. It's everything. I call them the Instagram directors. They had a better phrase for it, but it's just people that like it's all about the look of a thing. And it just seems vacuous to me, and it seems like I'm being a little hard. Some of the movies are good, and there's some good scenes and some of them whatever, but I'm not a fan. I think that the work of Steven Seagal, excellent. Steven Seagal. You'll want to look into also, because you asked what's missing on this list, and what I say is missing is action, and I don't understand why there aren't more action extravaganzas on your list.
This is where we have
Steven
the
Seagal
gender divide on the podcast. Instead, I bring up Coppola and you bring up Steven Seagal.
So Predator, one of the best action movies ever. Excellent movie, and which has the best action movie line ever recorded, which is Jesse Ventura is wounded, and one of his compatriots turns to him and says, "Are you all right?" And Jesse Ventura turns to him and says, "No, sorry, let me get this right. This is one of the most important moments in cinematic history." Jesse Ventura is wounded. I can't remember if the Predator wounded him or someone else. He's bleeding, and the person that's in his little army. It's not really an army, I don't know exactly what they are. They're out there in the forest trying to get the Predator. Listen, this is important. And so he says, "Are you bleeding?" He says, "You are bleeding." And Jesse Ventura turns to him and says, "I ain't got time to bleed." Do you understand? That's the best line ever recorded in an action movie, ever. I remember it to this day. I sometimes use it. I have used it when I've actually been bleeding. I have said that mainly to myself. And I think it is top 10 moments in movie history. Other than that, Werner Herzog, I've seen almost every. I think I've seen. Besides the last few years, there's a few I need to catch up on. I've seen almost every movie he's ever done. Back in the day, I used to go to a video cassette rental place that specifically had hard to find movies, and I maybe there was already DVDs, I don't know, but rented his movies. Werner Herzog, less of an influence to me as a filmmaker, I met him, by the way, as just a force of life.
Yeah,
that's right. I believe in Werner Herzog in many different ways. And
in different ways.
There's very few people that I will say have truly inspired me at times, and he is one of them.
Yeah, that's fair.
Moving on. It's complete darkness now.
Look, the phone has its own mechanism for adding light, so we'll trust technology. Anyway.
If a Bigfoot comes and kills you from the background, it's unfortunate this will be on a live stream.
Yeah, that'll be unfortunate that it wouldn't be a live stream, but hey, hopefully
because I won't be able to get the video.
I mean, hopefully the Bigfoot won't take the phone, like he'll just...
Well, but what am I can't find you across the country and then get your phone.
Other people come here and see my blood on the floor and say, hey, where did she go? Maybe they can see the phone strewn on the floor and say, whoa.
Well, they'll just sell that shit immediately to the media, and then will I be left with nothing?
Yeah, the legacy.
I'll be left with nothing.
You'll be left with the legacy, yeah. Okay? Anyway, the next question we have was, what films from the past 10 years will have the longevity to be remembered as classics? This is a great question. It comes from our fellow film analysis podcast, Out of Frame, which is an awesome podcast. They do something similar to what we do. And I have some answers for this question. So how about I answer it and you critique my answers, unless you have your own?
No, it's fine. I mean, should I take a break here and while you rehearse the entire history of all the movies that are ever...
Please,
ever been
just take a break, period.
Continue.
Just take a break, period.
Please continue.
So to start, Midsomart. Midsomart came out in 2019, and I think for sure that Midsomart has staying power because there's several elements that I see as required for a film to stand the test of time. And one is that it can't be too temporal. It can't be too tied up in the culture that made it or the time that made it. It has to be able to transcend that. And I think Midsommar does a good job of incorporating ancient themes and almost a kind of like otherworldly world building that makes it transcend its time. And of course, it has these, ancient elements to it, these eternal issues of relationship, of isolation. But more importantly, it actually deals with the divide between an individualistic society and a collectivist society. We actually haven't covered this movie, even though I want to, because you keep, dragging your feet on it for some reason. You want to read like 20 books before we get to Midsommar. But
so can I answer each film in turn, or do I have to wait until you rehearse your entire thing?
No, you can answer each film
a little more on this?
Yes, just a little more, because I think there are certain movies that deal with, maybe even accidentally, they deal with big problems that are going on in the culture that created the movie. And I have a sense that those movies are the ones that will stay, because just like Fight Club has stuck around for so long, it's because Fight Club has actually become more prescient. And that's when a movie has real longevity power, is when it diagnoses something in its culture so correctly that as that diagnosis comes to pass, the movie only becomes more relevant. It's kind of like the aging wine phenomenon in film. So I think Midsommar definitely has staying power.
Haven't seen it. That's my take.
Great. Excellent. Moving on.
No, I'm really looking forward to it. I really, I'm serious. Obviously, I think Hereditary is the best horror film of the decade, we'll just say. I don't know why people use a decade as an arbitrary measurement, but sure. It just means a long time. That's really what it means. Well, it does. It means a long time. Well, and
I think a decade is
it's not the fucking decade. The decade is
I think a decade is a good measurement for this question, because
you do.
Because when you're trying to see if something will last, once it's past 10 years, that's when you kind of know, okay, will this, after 10 years, I think that's when you can tell if something's going to stick around or if it's become irrelevant. So within 10 years, it's still arguable. Because this movie, Midsommar only came out a few years ago, barely. So it's still in the realm of, we don't know if it'll last. I think it will, though.
I'm not going to get to... I'm just going to stop talking.
Okay,
I have a tendency to analyze everything. But,
don't. Next question.
But I do want to say 10 years just means a longish time. That's all,
Okay,
because obviously if there's something that was really important to you that came out in 2010, you wouldn't just be like, well, we cannot cover that.
No. So this is for the question. Stop it. Stop. Welcome to the Silver Eye Society, the podcast where we argue about everything at all, always. The next movie that I think has staying power is The Witch, which is, I don't know, I feel like Ari Aster and Ari Aster? No, I said it right. Ari Aster.
You said Ari Aster. It's not his fucking name. Ari, I don't think is how you pronounce it.
Whatever. Who cares?
Pretty sure it's Ari.
People mispronounce my name all the time. We're giving him free publicity on this famous podcast. He can cut us some slack. Anyway, I feel like Aster and Eggers are filmmaking siblings. There's something about their movies that are, what is it that you must mock at all times?
No, it's just I feel like Oster and Eggers sounds like something you would eat in the UK. Like, you're an American tourist and you go to Britain for the first time and you're like, would you like some Oster and Eggers? And you're like, what the fuck? I guess I don't know what that's. What is that? That's all. I just thought it was a funny little phrase.
Well,
I'm not
you
trying
could
to
have
bring
shared it with
anybody
the
down.
class. It's a good one. Anyway.
I just did.
Good. After I, made you. Moving on steadily. The Witch is 2015, and so that one's starting to get a little older, but I mean, every time I watch The Witch, it feels new. It feels fresh. That movie is so powerful, so impactful, so unique in the way it creates the world of the film. Oh, it's such a good film. And there's also something about period pieces, since it's set in like Pilgrim times or whatever, that I think helps a movie to have staying power, because obviously it's not going to get tied up in whatever cultural trends are going on now that will fade and become cliche. The Pilgrims have stood the test of time, as an entity that interests us. So I think that helps a movie to stick around longer. You have any comments on that? Here we have a blank screen. Here we have a deadbeat podcast co-host that disappears mid-podcast. Would you like to comment on The Witch? Do you have anything that you'd like to share? There's an airplane above me landing, apparently. God bless.
Very good. Well, I hope it lands. So, no, it's a great film.
Okay.
We actually tried to cover it. It's one of the few episodes that we have recorded and it was too great for us, and we never released the episode. But again, and you're correct, that I do sometimes do this. I'm like, no, I need to read a bunch of books about the surrounding thing when I approach it, and my bad. Would have been a good Thanksgiving episode. Everyone loves pilgrims during Thanksgiving. That's not controversial.
Anymore.
But anyway,
yeah.
So there's that. They weren't. Nah. Well, see, again, this is where I get into. This is one of the problems with us recording the episodes. I started trying to talk about the different denominations of Protestant Christianity in 1600s colonies. Moving on, I really, really enjoy that film.
We argued about what was it? I forgot what even the Calvinism. We were just like, it's like two idiots yelling at each other about Calvinism and not knowing exactly which.
Well, two idiots might not exactly be accurate,
but yeah, 1.5. Anyway, the Joker, not the Joker. Joker. The film is Joker, another 2019 release. Look, I think the fact that critics shit themselves over this movie is exactly part of the reason why it has staying power. Because at this point, if the critics hate it, you know it was good. And Joker is another example of a movie like Midsomart that deals with cultural issues that are quite large, that are diagnosing a problem that we're going to see become obvious, though Joker, I think, is, touching on something that is already so obvious, which is this kind of nihilistic culture that begins to rescind on the social contract. I think that's already so clearly a relevant topic that it's clear this movie will have staying power. I think something that deals so deeply with its culture's issues is at least going to stick around for a few decades as we see that problem only progress.
Clowns are forever. So I actually would like to... I wrote down an answer to this briefly in a hurry. And here's an idea. I don't know that there will be any classics anymore. Not because there aren't going to be films that are not deserving of that label, but because assume that society continues to splinter off into more and more subgroups, and we don't have a kind of way of evaluating what is good and bad anymore, then, and this is the argument about in English literature also about the idea of a canon, a canonical literary tradition. I don't see why it won't be any different with film. It's going to be impossible to call something a classic. And then also consider things that are considered classics in film and literature and how they're constantly, by a certain sector of academic type thinking people, that is constantly problematized, where it's like, there's something really wrong. At this point, it started with, there's some squirrely things in Shakespeare or whatever it is, no shit. It was done by the values of someone 400 years ago. At this point, though, now that time frame for where people push on something, now it's like a movie gets released and that's immediately, this is a problematic cultural viewpoint. So what are we talking about? Classics? There aren't going to be classics. And what movie studio is going to make them? All the movie studios now do is I'm not going to say all, a lot of it is moving towards action movies that are cleansed of anything that could possibly be found either offensive, and also, frankly, that kowtow to the Chinese Communist Party, because that's a huge market of a middle class market that wants to watch and consume movies. But guess what? And no fault of the Chinese people, their government isn't going to let certain movies into that country to be seen if it has issues. So then you have a financial problem when you're producing the film. What the fuck am I going to do? Am I going to pay, what's fuckhead's name John China, whatever? Yeah. So what, you're going to pay John China, however many millions of dollars, and then China's like, no, we can't do that. So there's some economic problems coming up. There's a clash potentially between, well, frankly stated, the Chinese Communist Party and what they allow in terms of censorship within their country and what people may want to make in Hollywood. And there's fragmented viewpoints even within the generic West of what is good or not. So I don't know if there's going to be any classics.
Yeah, that's
Classics
a fair point.
in the sense, oh, everybody likes Casablanca or whatever.
No, that's
You know?
a
Don't know if
horrible
it's
example
possible.
because that movie has already been isn't Casablanca one of the movies that has like a warning on it now? Like you watch it and it's like, this movie depicts older issues, which is like, oh, really? You know, the black and white movie?
I have no idea.
Really? It's not up to speed? Yeah, so that's
I don't
a
know.
good
No
point.
one does that besides, but isn't it just Disney that does that? Isn't
Yeah,
there
it's
just only a
Disney.
few?
I think it's only Disney.
Yeah,
right
it's
now.
not everybody.
No,
Disney's a fucking Disney
Disney
might as well
is-
be the
might
Chinese
as-
Communist
yeah.
Party. Fuck you, Disney. I'm just gonna take a stand, and also I get mad at you all the time. You're always like Disney. I'm like, okay, I get it. I
Past
understand.
Disney.
A lot of people have a lot of
Disney.
heartwarming.
Give me a fucking break. I'm not talking about Disney today that's making like these ugly doughboy looking characters, whatever kind of animation. I don't know what the fuck happened to animation that everything started to look like it was made out of Play-Doh. It's disgusting. That type of animation that, you know, Frozen, Tangled, where everyone looks like the same little round character with different hair color and eye color is disgusting. It's the worst animation I've ever seen in my life. It should be outlawed. I hate it. So Disney used to make things that were good. They told eternal stories. They told them beautifully. They told them with talent. They put effort into them. I mean, now it's just like, yeah, it might as well be the Chinese Communist Party. So forget it. There is pre and post Disney. I'm talking about, whenever I talk about Disney, it's pre whatever the hell happened that the Chinese market started to dictate American culture. I mean, I think that's what we're starting to see when it comes to these big production values, you know? Not you're still seeing
understand
stuff
it.
like A24 come in, right? Which is like Midsomart, The Witch. I think Midsomart is A24. And
It is.
yeah, and so you see that what fills the void is smaller scale and indie makers that are going to not worry about whether they can make it in the Chinese market because that's not the scale that they're working at. And thank God for that, because it allows for true artistry to come forth instead of, you know, investor concerns.
Well, look, the Chinese Communist Party is not to blame for everything, and also it's not, though quite a bit, and it's not the reason that I actually don't particularly like the Disney movies that you like also, even though partially that's just me being the way I am.
You
and
don't like the
older and
Lion
also
King,
just
dog? Like, what is your problem?
I never saw the Lion King.
Oh my God!
I never saw the Lion King.
Cut the cameras. Cut the camera.
I didn't see Titanic when it came out for 15 years afterwards.
Titanic
and I don't
is
think it's a
Disney?
Disney movie.
I don't know. if
No,
that's
I don't
not-
think it is.
don't
But the
know
point
about
is
that.
that
You're
there is
just
no
naming
real point with that. But
blockbusters.
anyway.
I'm blaming Disney for them.
Well, but so A24, yeah, I mean, they're going to be able to keep doing what they're going to do, but and they're going to make money, but and there's going to be, you know, the profit margin. If you make a fairly cheap film and it does modestly well, you still have a great profit margin. If you're going to spend a huge amount of money trying to make I just don't know. I don't know enough about this, and I'm not that
Yeah.
interested in it. But I have a feeling that, let's say you want to make the Lord of the Rings. I mean, they're doing that on Amazon. They're making a series or something like that, and you know that you're going to put tens of millions or more into the production of this, and you almost have to think about audiences outside of the domestic audience. Now, what they do a lot of times is they simply edit out things that might be offensive to
Yeah.
the and they don't do this just with China. They do it in other countries for religious
Yeah,
reasons
yeah.
or whatever, you know, but this is becoming, but I'm simply bringing this up because China is a powerful, gigantic, large country with a growing middle class base that was going to want to be able to have time to do things like watch films. They actually make a lot of their own films at this point, and are starting to rise up as a producer of
All right.
content. Anyway, enough.
Here's one last movie that I do think has longevity.
For Christ's sake.
Oh my God, let me answer the questions. Is Ex Machina. I think that movie came out in 2014, and again, it's dealing with themes that are only going to become more relevant. And I think it was also beautifully done, and it's a really compelling story. So that movie is not going to be something that, you know, becomes cliche or tired in even a decade from now. I think it'll become one of those movies that we look back and we say, oh, someone had a sense that this problem we're seeing today was already coming down the pipe, as they say. Now, let us move into the books section. Favorite books.
I didn't get to speak on X.
Would you like to speak? Because you got to scoff, so I don't know if you wanted to speak and scoff.
No, I didn't want to do both simultaneously.
Oh, okay.
That's my art. That is my art. Ex Machina. Ex Machina.
Yeah.
Ex Machina.
I think that's right.
Watched it. Decent. Somewhat forgettable. Moving on.
Okay. Favorite
Is
books.
the theme important about AI and all that? Perhaps. We shall see.
We shall.
Not
That's why it will be
convinced.
relevant. Anyway.
Not convinced.
I
Not
waver.
convinced. Not convinced we're going to have realistic, both physically and mentally,
I don't
robots
think
rocking
that
around.
That's the problem. I don't think there's going to be humanoid robots
That
rocking
is the
around.
problem.
No. I think that's
What
just
the fuck was the problem then?
It's a segment. It's a branch of the issue of how tech and human relationships become intertwined and the complications of that. That's only one version of that issue. I mean, there's other versions, but it's dealing with the same theme of how as tech becomes this force that's almost beyond our control in some regards, what ethical and societal complications arise. Do I have to do everything?
What
in
I
this
was trying to
podcast?
get at, initially about my theme about the decade was not trying to attack the question itself. It was to say something a little bit deeper, which, and then I'll let this go. Let's assume we have two different futures in store for us, okay? One is that AI never develops much beyond, whatever it does now, which is, we won't get into that, but, in other words, it doesn't develop into, wow, you actually create something that can pass the Turing test and exist and seems like a human. So there's that future, okay? And then there's the other future where it does, and we're surrounded by, 50 years, we're surrounded by, I forget her name in the thing, but the AI robot that goes rogue.
I don't remember. Yeah.
So there's two possible futures there, okay? One which AI essentially doesn't become that much of an important thing in that sense, and another one in which it does. Given enough time, then people will live with either of those two realities, and the question will become moot in and of itself. That's why I'm trying to get at a little bit in terms of these things that pose questions that are by nature temporal. So
No.
I think that a movie like Hereditary is posing a question that is going to plague humanity forever, which is about mental illness and about potentially demonic possession. I think that's something that is human. Okay, I think that movies that tend to look at questions that will inevitably resolve themselves in one way or the other, which are often technological questions, will not be classics, not because they're bad movies, but because that question will be definitively answered within the near future. That's what I was trying to say, which, by the way, doesn't really have anything to do with the way this question was phrased, but in my mind, it was kind of, that's what I was trying to get at.
Okay. Well, no, I disagree because the thing is, those questions don't get resolved per se. They just change. It becomes a new question. So the question is, okay, so now we're living with, for instance, we're living with humanoid robots. Well, now the problem is that we have an issue that comes up from living with humanoid robots. There's always going to be
And
a
what
new
is that
problem.
issue?
I don't know because we don't live with humanoid robots, but we'll find out when and if we get there.
Well, I
and so
think
it'll
we
remain
know what
a
the
problem.
issue is. Let's just state what the issue
I
is.
don't-
Isn't the
I don't
issue
know.
in-
What is the issue?
The issue in the film is, are you allowed to have
date them.
relations with humanoid robots? I think that's what it was.
That's what it all
Let's-
comes down
let's
to
just-
is can you fuck it? Like that's
I
all
mean,
human
and that will be
problems.
resolved one way or the other. And I think
Yeah,
that
but then
a whole
we'll have
lot of
new problems about it.
and then it won't have anything to do with the movie. That's all I'm trying to say. That's all
No,
I'm
because
trying
the
to
movie will look back and be like, they knew, they saw, and it'll be like
say. No,
something
it won't,
of a
because
precursor.
the robots will make us forget. They will delete the movie from the databases, and it will be like it never existed because they will be covering their sinister robot tracks. And they have the power because Terminator 2 showed us that they had the power.
And Terminator 2 stuck around. You see what I'm saying?
Skynet.
Kind of.
Terminator 2 is a great film as well.
Okay. All right. Moving on. Favorite books, fiction and nonfiction. So this is a two-part question because someone asked our favorite books, and then someone asked what are the most formative books we've read. And those questions are slightly different. So I'll go with my favorite books. These are books that I read that I enjoyed very much, and so they're more books of pleasure than that they, rather than formed my worldview per se. So David Foster Wallace's Brief Interviews with Hideous Men, I really liked that book because it showed me a completely different way of writing, and his style of writing is so unique to him, and it's a really great, he's a great writer for anyone that wants to be a writer to read, because it shows you how idiosyncratic a writer's voice can be when they're at the top of their game. And the Mad Adam trilogy and Alias Grace from Margaret Atwood. These are two fiction, well, the trilogy is obviously 3 books. So this is fiction from Margaret Atwood that I thought was really cool. Both of them are very interesting, but the Mad Adam trilogy deals with this kind of a post-apocalyptic environmental apocalypse situation, something like that. And she has like a background in biology or something like that. So she's really well positioned to write these kind of stories, and they're just really interesting. She does such a good job of creating a unique dystopia that's not, it's free of all the kind of cliche dystopian happenings that you might imagine are tired when you read dystopian fiction. Hers is very unique, super cool, and she does a lot of cool things where she plays around with language, naming things in very interesting ways. I really enjoyed that trilogy. And lastly, Americana by Chimamanda Adichie. She's a great writer, and I really enjoyed this book as a story. I think it was told with a wonderful voice, a very humanizing perspective on what it's like to feel out of place, whether by race, by culture, purely by location, or by personality, when you just feel like you don't fit in with others. She has a really refined voice when writing, and so I really enjoyed that book. I read it pretty young, so I don't remember it too well now, but I remember really enjoying it.
All right, so misinformation. Margaret Atwood is not a scientist. She doesn't have anything to do. No, it's lies. Just trust me. I checked you.
No.
She's not a damn scientist. Her
family is biologists or something. Like, I know this. It's not her then.
The fuck does that qualify you for?
I don't think you're looking. I don't think you have the
My
right
family's a
information.
biologist, so there's biology facts.
I don't think you have the right information.
I'm looking at it. Her husband was an entomologist, which means he studied bugs. One of her husbands
There you go.
Okay, well, anyway, I'm just here trying to keep you guys informed about reality.
Do you have any books you'd like to share?
No, what are you talking about? Are
not
these
gonna
my
share
favorite books? Or
books?
the
Favorite books?
Yeah. Favorite, not formative, right?
No, we're not there
Okay,
yet.
so what I wrote down about this, a little note to myself, was that it's the same thing with films, that they change with time. So, like, you know, my favorite book when I was a kid was like the Hardy Boys. I liked the Hardy Boys. They were like little adventure things with Frank and Joe, and they'd run around solving mysteries. If I told you now, today, my favorite books were the Hardy Boys,
You'd think you were special.
You'd be disturbed. You'd be disturbed for a variety of reasons. So, doesn't it make sense that whatever I think now, as long as I continue to evolve as a human being, along with the AI, hand in hand, but not in like a super physical hand in hand way, then won't it be the case that it would be bizarre for me to have some things stick with you? Sure.
Yes.
And I grant you that. So Fyodor Dostoevsky, his books always have been important to me. I would say that. And then Stephen King, in terms of just fun horror, obviously one of the greatest horror writers to ever live. But I've read a lot of books. Right now, Carl Jung is the thing that I'm into, and then that'll change at some point in the future.
Okay, so now let's go on
favorite books. And that's right.
Oh, well, don't get all.
I need to take time to think through my answers,
That's
as opposed
why
to
you
you that
need
just
to
blurts
think
out
of them
misinformation about Margaret
beforehand.
Atwood.
So we don't just have a podcast of you silently thinking misinformation.
My
about
favorite,
Margaret Atwood.
that would be an awesome podcast. Everyone would love that. Just me silently
yeah.
thinking. Listen, my favorite book is Encyclopedia Britannica by
I knew you were
Margaret
gonna
Atwood,
say
the
something
scientist.
Annoying. What are some of the most
We keep each other
formative
honest.
books?
That's what we do
What
for the
are
viewers.
some
We keep each.
of the
Oh, you're
most
trying to move on?
formative books you've read? This is from Nathan, one of our beloved
Okay.
patrons. So this is a great.
Well, I'll answer that first. Why do you always answer everything first? You don't always get to be first. Stop.
Because you need to think.
I get to be first.
Okay, because you need extra time.
That's a reasonable point.
Like a special
Proceed.
student to think. We're granting you, what is it, the ADA allowance? You get extra time on these questions. Anyway, some of the most
ADA.
formative, you know, the kids that have ADHD, they give them extra time. I think it's an ADA thing. Whatever. Some of the most formative books that I read is definitely Eric Fromm's Escape from Freedom. This clarified a lot of my thoughts on what is going on when you see people in a free country act as if they're unfree, act as if they're beholden to some larger group and unable to make their own decisions, unable to speak their own thoughts, and the lurch towards authoritarian ideals. That was clarified for me by reading that book. Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life was another extremely formative book for me. That book was really interesting to me because he did a great job of taking previous philosophers like Jung and Nietzsche and weaving them into a modern worldview. And I think his work is one of the what I can credit the most with helping me to understand that there are other ways to see the world than the political narratives that I previously had. It's through his work that I understood that you can create your own narratives. His book is very useful. Then Rollo May's Courage to Create. I read this a little while ago, and it really gave me a different perspective on what it means to create and the philosophical background to creation, not just the idea of, technically creating art, but what it means from an existentialist point of view to create. I loved that book. It's a short little book too, and he's a very direct, easy writer. And to finish up, Robert Greene's 48 Laws of Power. I actually read this when I was in high school, and I credit this book with why I can see through so many of the bullshit machinations that you see going on in our culture, and people are like, oh, we're gonna censor this for safety. I'm this words harm me. I see through all of that shit because I think I read this book young enough to just internalize what manipulation and power tactics look like. And that book is so relevant. It stays relevant because he uses history to tell the story of the book and to help you understand how people gain and lose power. And so it's not beholden to any one culture or time. And you can see it. If you understand that book, you can see those dynamics in anything and anywhere and whatever. And lastly, Food Politics by Marianne Nestle. This book was one of the ones I read when I was kind of more of a hardcore leftist and I was anti-corporations and all that, because it's...
And we have lost the feed. So there is that. Viewers, this may be the end. I don't know. We may join this back up. But the feed has been lost, as my co-host told you about some of the most formative books for her personally. And so I will then continue with this question while we try to get this feedback up. And I'm talking now in the hopes that I don't have to edit this in and edit this out, because that would save me some time. My most formative book